The road narrows, the cell signal dies, and you find yourself in a place where time seems to stand still. Small towns, quaint facades hiding secrets as deep as their wells. Welcome, traveler, to nightmare true horror. Tonight, we wander the shadowed streets of 7 such hamlets where neighborly takes on a chilling new meaning. What unsettling silence have you encountered in the heart of rural isolation? Share your own small-town disquiet in the comments, and if the thought of peeling back the layers of idyllic charm to reveal the rot beneath intrigues you, ensure you are subscribed. The townsfolk are always watching, and the most unsettling truths often lie just beneath the surface. Pull up a chair. The diner's open, but be careful what you order. The silence that fell over Murphy's Diner when I mentioned my full name should have been my first warning. Every fork stopped moving. Every conversation died, and 20 pairs of eyes stared at me like I just confessed to murder. Just call me Sarah, I said quickly, trying to break the tension that had settled over the small restaurant-like fog. The conversations resumed, but something had shifted. People kept glancing at me, whispering behind their hands, and when the waitress brought my check, her hands were shaking. What was so dangerous about having a last name in Millbrook, Kentucky? I'm Sarah Chen, a 29-year-old freelance journalist who'd moved to this Appalachian town of 847 people to write a book about rural America. The rent was cheap, the scenery was beautiful, and the isolation seemed perfect for focused writing. But Millbrook had rules I didn't understand. During my first week, everyone I met followed the same pattern. I'm Tom, said the grocery store owner. Call me Linda, said the librarian. Sheriff Mike introduced the local law enforcement. No surnames, no family names, like they'd all collectively agreed to erase half their identities. When I asked Linda at the library about it, she just smiled nervously. We're informal folks here. First names are friendlier, but her eyes darted to the windows as she spoke, like she was watching for someone. The post office was where things got strange. Betty, the postmaster, handled my mail forwarding requests with obvious discomfort. She kept checking over her shoulder and spoke in whispers even though we were alone. You might want to consider using just your first name on mail, she suggested. Safer that way. Safer how? Betty's face went pale. Just trust me. That night, I researched the town online. What I found made no sense. Property records, voter registrations, business licenses, all public documents that should contain full names, were either missing or heavily redacted. It was as if someone had systematically scrubbed Millbrook's residence from official existence. The next morning, I returned to the post office with a package to ship. Betty wasn't at the counter, but I could hear her voice coming from somewhere below, along with what sounded like a heated argument. Can't keep doing this forever. Safer than the alternative. What if someone finds out? I followed the voices to a basement door, marked authorized personnel only. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see a staircase leading down into darkness. My journalistic instincts overcame my common sense. The basement was larger than I'd expected, filled with filing cabinets and storage boxes, but dominating one entire wall was something that made my blood freeze. A corkboard covered with missing person flyers. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, all with full names, dates of birth, and last known locations. Many of the photos looked recent, but the dates went back 15 years. And in the bottom right corner was a section labeled Millbrook Residents. New identities with photocopied driver's licenses, showing the faces I recognized from around town, but with completely different names. Tom from the grocery store was actually Marcus Valdez from Phoenix. Linda the librarian was Rebecca Santos from Miami. Sheriff Mike was Detective Raymond Foster from Chicago. These people weren't just avoiding last names. They were living under assumed identities. You shouldn't be down here. I spun around to find Betty standing at the bottom of the stairs, her face grim. Who are these people? I whispered, gesturing at the board. People who needed to disappear, Betty said. People who witnessed things they shouldn't have. People whose families were threatened. People like you, who ask too many questions. What are you talking about? Millbrook isn't just a town, Sarah. It's a sanctuary. A place where people can hide when nowhere else is safe. Her voice dropped even lower. But it only works if everyone follows the rules. What rules? No last names, no contact with the outside world, no records that can be traced. Betty moved closer, and I could see genuine fear in her eyes. And no journalists writing books about us. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Everyone in Millbrook was in witness protection. Not the official kind, but something darker, more desperate. A town of people so terrified of whoever they were hiding from that they'd erased their own identities. I won't write about this, I said. I'll leave tonight. Betty shook her head sadly. I'm sorry, Sarah, but you've seen too much now. That's when I heard the footsteps upstairs. Heavy boots, multiple people, moving with purpose. Who's up there? I asked. But Betty's expression told me everything I needed to know. I ran for the basement's back exit, bursting through a door that led to an alley behind the post office. My car was parked 3 blocks away, and I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life. Behind me, I could hear shouting, car engine starting, the sound of a manhunt beginning. I made it to my Honda and drove straight out of town, not stopping until I reached the interstate. In my rearview mirror, I saw 2 pickup trucks following, but they turned back at the county line. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to research what I discovered. The missing person reports I'd seen in that basement were real. Dozens of witnesses to organized crime, police corruption, and corporate malfeasance who'd vanished from their old lives. But according to official records, none of them had ever been found. Millbrook, Kentucky, doesn't appear on any current maps. The address where I'd lived for a week now shows up as vacant farmland on satellite imagery. It's like the entire town disappeared after I left. Sometimes I wonder if those people found a new sanctuary, another place where they could hide from whatever they were running from. But mostly, I wonder if they're still looking for me. Because last week, I got a letter with no return address. Inside was a single line written in Betty's handwriting. Some stories are too dangerous to tell. The soft electronic chime from inside the Desert Star gas station rang at exactly 1:17 a.m. Even though I was still standing beside my car at pump number 3. I looked up from filling my tank to see the glass doors standing wide open, fluorescent lights spilling out into the Nevada desert darkness. But no one had walked through those doors. The chime sounded again, then again, like someone was repeatedly triggering the sensor. But the doorway remained empty, just harsh white light and the distant hum of refrigeration units. I finished pumping gas and waited for someone to appear behind the counter. When no one did, I walked toward the building, my footsteps echoing off the concrete. The desert air was still and oppressive, carrying the smell of creosote and something else, something organic and unpleasant. Who leaves a gas station completely unattended, in the middle of nowhere? I'm Jake Morrison, a 34-year-old insurance investigator driving from Phoenix to Reno for a case. I'd been on Highway 95 for 6 hours, and this was the first gas station I'd seen in 80 miles. The GPS showed the next one was another 40 miles north, too far to risk on fumes. Desert Star Gas was one of those old-school truck stops that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Hand-painted signs advertised cold beer and hot food. But the parking lot was empty, except for my Honda Accord, and what looked like an employee's beat-up Chevy pickup parked around back. The building sat at the intersection of Highway 95 and a dirt road that disappeared into the darkness toward distant mountains. No other lights were visible in any direction, just endless black desert under a canopy of stars. As I approached the entrance, I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed off the empty shelves inside, but got no response. The automatic doors kept chiming as I walked through them, the sensor apparently malfunctioning. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. Aisles stocked with road trip essentials, a coffee station with fresh brewed coffee still steaming, hot dogs rolling on the warmer. But as I looked closer, details began to feel wrong. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the counter behind the register, the bread still soft and fresh. A can of Coke was open beside it, still fizzing. Whoever had been working here had left recently, very recently. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "I need to pay for gas." Nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of air conditioning. I walked around the counter to look for a bell or some way to summon the attendant. That's when I noticed the surveillance monitor displaying feeds from 4 security cameras. Parking lot, store interior, back entrance, and storage room. The timestamp showed 1:19 a.m. The parking lot camera showed my car at pump 3 and the empty Chevy around back. The store camera showed me standing behind the counter looking at the monitor. Everything normal. But when I looked at the back entrance camera, my blood turned cold. The rear door was standing wide open, hanging off its hinges like it had been kicked in from the outside. Boxes and supplies were scattered across the floor, and what looked like a dark stain spread across the concrete just outside the doorway. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. Someone had broken into this place recently, but where was the employee? I fumbled for my phone to call 911, but there was no signal. The nearest cell tower was probably 50 miles away. I was completely isolated, miles from help, in a place where something violent had clearly just happened. That's when I noticed the smartphone lying face down beside the cash register. It wasn't mine. It must belong to whoever worked here. I picked it up and saw that the video recording app was still running. The timestamp showed it had been recording for 37 minutes. With shaking hands, I stopped the recording and played it back. The video started with a young man, maybe early 20s, setting the phone on the counter. He had sandy brown hair and wore a Desert Star gas polo shirt with a name tag that read Kevin. "Okay, so this is my last night working this hellhole," he said to the camera, grinning. "Figured I'd document it for posterity. Maybe catch some of the weird shit that happens out here." For the first 20 minutes, the video was mundane. Kevin restocking shelves, helping a trucker who paid cash, eating his sandwich while reading a magazine. Normal late-night gas station stuff. Then at the 23-minute mark, Kevin's head snapped up like he'd heard something. He looked toward the back of the store, frowning. "What the hell?" he muttered, walking off camera. For 2 minutes, the video showed just the empty counter area. Then came a sound that made my skin crawl. A loud crash followed by Kevin screaming, "No! Get away from me! Help! Somebody help!" The screaming cut off abruptly, replaced by the sound of a struggle. Heavy footsteps, something being dragged across the floor. At the 28-minute mark, a figure appeared briefly at the edge of the camera's view. A tall man in dark clothing, dragging something toward the back entrance. The image was too grainy and dark to make out details, but I could see enough to know that what he was dragging was human-sized and completely limp. The rest of the recording was just empty store, and the sound of the malfunctioning door chime. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Kevin had been kidnapped, or worse, less than an hour ago. Whoever did it might still be nearby. I looked around the store with new eyes, seeing evidence I'd missed before. Drops of what looked like blood leading from behind the counter toward the back. A display of chips knocked over. Deep scratches in the linoleum floor, like something heavy had been dragged across it. The smart thing would be to get in my car and drive to the next town and find police. Let them handle this. But Kevin might still be alive. He might be somewhere close by, needing help. I grabbed a flashlight from one of the store shelves and headed toward the back entrance, every instinct screaming at me to run the other direction. The rear of the building was even more disturbing than the video had suggested. The metal door hung at an angle, its frame bent and twisted. The dark stain on the concrete was definitely blood, still wet enough to reflect my flashlight beam. Track marks led from the door across the parking area toward a cluster of Joshua trees, about 50 yards away. In the silence of the desert night, I could hear something that made my stomach clench. A faint moaning sound, barely audible, coming from the direction of the trees. Kevin was alive. I followed the drag marks, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The moaning got louder as I approached the trees, accompanied by what sounded like muffled crying. Behind the largest Joshua tree, I found him. Kevin was bound to the trunk with duct tape, his mouth gagged, his face bloody and swollen. He was conscious, and when he saw my flashlight, his eyes went wide with a mixture of hope and terror. I ran toward him, already reaching for my pocket knife to cut him free. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. Shouldn't have come looking. a gravelly voice said from the darkness. I spun around to see a tall figure standing about 20 feet away, silhouetted against the gas station's lights. He was holding something long and metallic, a crowbar or tire iron. This is just business, the man continued, stepping closer. Nothing personal, but you've seen too much now. I aimed my flashlight at his face and immediately wished I hadn't. He was maybe 50 with dead eyes and the kind of methodical calm that comes from having done this before. This wasn't his first time. Let the kid go, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Take whatever you want from the register and leave. He laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. Register? Son, this isn't about money. Kevin here saw something he shouldn't have seen. Made a phone call he shouldn't have made. What are you talking about? That truck that came through here 2 hours ago. Driver was carrying something he shouldn't have been carrying. Kevin got curious, started asking questions. Made some calls to people who don't like questions. The pieces clicked together. This was about smuggling. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking. Something valuable enough to kill for. Kevin was trying to do the right thing, the man continued. But sometimes doing the right thing gets you dead. Behind me, Kevin was making desperate noises through his gag, trying to warn me about something. I turned and saw headlights approaching from the highway. 2 sets of them, moving fast. My associates, the man said, right on time. That's when I ran. I sprinted toward my car, the man behind me giving chase. His heavy boots pounded against the concrete as I fumbled for my keys. The engine started on the first try, and I floored it toward the highway just as 2 black SUVs turned into the gas station parking lot. In my rear-view mirror, I saw them surrounding the area where I'd found Kevin. Then the gas station lights went out, plunging the desert into complete darkness. I drove 70 miles without stopping, hands shaking, until I reached the next town and found a sheriff's station. The police found Desert Star gas station empty when they arrived 3 hours later. No Kevin, no evidence of violence, no blood. No blood. Even the broken rear door had been replaced. The security cameras had been wiped clean. Kevin Martinez was reported missing by his family 2 days later. But the investigation went nowhere. No physical evidence, no witnesses except me. And my story sounded crazy even to my own ears. The trucking company that ran that route claimed no knowledge of any unusual cargo. The gas station's owner said Kevin had quit without notice. A flaky kid who probably ran off to California. Case closed. But I know what I saw in that desert. And I know that Kevin Martinez is still out there somewhere, if he's still alive at all. The worst part is wondering how many other gas stations, truck stops, and roadside businesses are part of this network. How many employees have seen too much and disappeared into the desert night? I don't drive Highway 95 anymore, and I never stop for gas after midnight, no matter how empty my tank gets. Because somewhere in the Nevada desert, there are people who kill witnesses and erase evidence, like it's just another day at the office, and they're very, very good at what they do. The silence in Oakhaven Elementary was the first thing that hit you. A heavy, suffocating blanket woven with the scent of burnt wood and stale chalk. But that night, as we crept through the boarded-up main entrance, there was another sound, faint and rhythmic, almost lost beneath the whisper of the wind through broken window panes. It sounded like a child, humming a tuneless, repetitive little song. My friend Liam, ever the daredevil, just grinned. Probably just the wind man. But I saw the way his eyes darted nervously into the deeper shadows of the main hall. Oakhaven L was supposed to be empty, a tomb of ash and forgotten lessons. So why did it suddenly feel like someone or something was still holding class? My name is Jake. I was 17 that summer. And Oakhaven, our sleepy little town, offered precious few thrills beyond tipping cows or trying to get a decent Wi-Fi signal at the Greasy Spoon Diner. Oakhaven Elementary had been closed for 5 long years, ever since the Great Fire of 18 gutted most of the new wing. Rumors, of course, clung to the charred ruins like ivy, tales of faulty wiring, disgruntled janitors, even whispers of something more sinister, deliberately set. Mostly, though, it was just a creepy, fenced-off landmark, a dare waiting to happen. Tonight, Liam, Maya, our resident pragmatist and budding photographer, and I were taking that dare. Getting in was pathetically easy. A loose board over a basement window, probably pried open by countless other bored teenagers before us. The air inside was thick, tasting of soot, damp plaster, and something else. A faint, almost sweet, coppery tang that seemed to get stronger as we moved deeper into the building, towards the older, less fire-damaged kindergarten wing. Most of the school was a disaster zone. Charred desks, melted plastic, hallways slick with years of rainwater and grime. But the kindergarten wing, at the far end of a long, dark corridor, was eerily preserved, just coated in a thick layer of dust and silence. That's where we found the door. Classroom K3, unlike the others in this wing, which were either missing or hanging crookedly on their hinges. This one was closed, solidly. And when Liam, with his usual bravado, tried the old brass knob, it didn't budge. Locked. He pressed his ear to the wood. "Guys," he whispered, his voice suddenly tight. I think I hear something, rustling, like someone's in there." Maya rolled her eyes, but even she looked a little pale. I felt it too, a cold knot forming in my stomach. That coppery smell was definitely strongest here. Liam, never one to back down, found an old rusted crowbar in what must have been a janitor's closet, its door long gone. The sound of him working on the lock, a newer heavy-duty padlock that looked jarringly out of place on the old wooden door, seemed to echo through the silent school like gunshots. Each groan of metal, each splintering crack of wood, ratcheted up the tension. Maya kept glancing nervously down the dark hallway. "Maybe we should go, guys," she whispered. "This feels wrong." But Liam was relentless. With a final, sickening crunch, the padlock snapped. He pushed the door inward, just a crack. He froze, his face illuminated by the weak beam of his flashlight, suddenly drained of all color. "Jake, he choked out. You gotta see this." We crowded behind him, peering into the small kindergarten classroom. It wasn't empty. In one corner on the dusty linoleum floor was a filthy, stained mattress. Beside it, a half-eaten sandwich on a paper plate, a plastic bottle of water, still with condensation on it. Fresh. Someone was living here. On the old teacher's desk, its surface scarred with decades of childish carvings, lay a single gleaming hunting knife, its blade catching the light. My breath hitched. The windows were crudely blacked out from the inside with pieces of cardboard and what looked like old, dark fabric. Children's drawings were taped haphazardly to the peeling paint of the walls. But these weren't the cheerful, brightly colored creations you'd expect. They were disturbing. Stick figures with too many limbs, or no faces. Houses with no doors. Black suns. Trees that looked like grasping claws. The coppery smell was overpowering in here, mixed with the unwashed scent of a human body. Maya let out a small stifled gasp, her camera clicking almost involuntarily. Under the edge of the mattress, a small worn teddy bear lay on its side, one button eye missing, and next to it, a single child's sneaker, caked in what looked like fresh, dark mud. It was small, too small. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Outside the classroom, our heads snapped up. Someone else was in the school, and they were close. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, approaching slowly down the corridor. We doused our flashlights, plunging the small room into near-total darkness, our hearts hammering in unison. The footsteps stopped right outside K3. The doorknob, the one Liam had just broken the lock on, began to turn, slowly, silently. A low voice, cold and flat, devoid of any emotion, cut through the suffocating silence. "Took you long enough to find my little classroom." A pause, then, "Now, who wants to stay for story time?" It wasn't a question. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a question. We didn't wait to see who it was. Liam, reacting on pure instinct, slammed his shoulder against the flimsy classroom door, trying to wedge it shut. Maya was already scrambling towards the blacked-out windows, tearing at the cardboard. I fumbled for the crowbar Liam had dropped. The figure in the hallway pushed against the door, their strength surprising. The wood splintered. Not so fast, little explorers. The voice chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that made my skin crawl. Class is just beginning. Maya ripped a section of cardboard away from a window, revealing the grimy glass. Liam gave one last desperate shove against the door, then yelled, "Window! Go!" He grabbed the crowbar. I didn't know what he intended to do, but there was no time. Maya was already smashing the glass with a loose brick she'd found. We scrambled through the jagged opening, cutting ourselves on the sharp edges, dropping into the overgrown weeds outside, just as the classroom door finally burst inward. We ran through the dark, silent grounds of Oakhaven Elementary, not looking back. The sound of that cold, flat voice, that dry chuckle, echoing in our ears. We didn't stop until we reached the relative safety of the brightly lit streets of downtown Oakhaven. We never called the police. What would we say? We were trespassing. We had no proof, beyond our terrified story and a few blurry photos Maya had managed to snap in the classroom. Who would believe us? The next day, driven by a morbid curiosity, Liam and I went back in daylight, approaching the school cautiously. When I'm back in daylight. The broken window of K3 was boarded up, neatly, professionally. The loose board over the basement window was nailed firmly shut. It was as if we'd never been there, as if our terrifying discovery had been nothing more than a shared nightmare. But we know what we saw. The mattress, the fresh food, the knife, those awful, disturbing drawings, the sneaker, the voice in the hall. Oakhaven Elementary still stands there, a dark, silent sentinel at the edge of town. The official story is still that it's empty, awaiting demolition, or perhaps a miraculous renovation. But every time I pass it, especially at night, I swear I can still smell that faint, sweet, coppery scent on the wind. And I wonder who's holding class in that locked room now, and what terrible stories they might be telling in the dark. The sound of my basement door creaking open at 2:30 a.m. pulled me from sleep like a gunshot. I lay perfectly still in my bed, listening to the old colonial house settle around me, trying to convince myself it was just the Maine winter causing the wood to expand and contract. But I distinctly remembered locking that door before bed. The creak came again, followed by the soft whisper of footsteps on the wooden stairs leading down to my basement. Someone was in my house. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the bedroom window, peering down at my driveway. No unfamiliar cars, no signs of forced entry. But the back door, the one that led to my kitchen, was standing slightly ajar, letting in the frigid February air. How long had it been open? And who knew exactly where to find my spare key? I'm Rebecca Martinez, a 34-year-old freelance graphic designer who'd moved to Millfield, Maine, 6 months ago after a messy divorce. The 1800s colonial was a steal at $120,000, probably because it needed extensive renovations and sat on the outskirts of a town with only 800 residents. The isolation had seemed perfect for starting over. Now it felt like a trap. Millfield was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where newcomers were noticed and discussed over coffee at Pearl's Diner. The locals had been friendly enough, especially Roy Hutchins, who owned the only hardware store in town. Roy had been almost aggressively helpful since my first visit in September. A thin, weathered man in his 50s with pale blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything. He'd immediately launched into questions about my renovation plans. "Old colonial like yours, you'll need to rewire the whole place," he'd said, studying me intently. "Plumbing's probably original too. Hope you're handy with tools." When I mentioned I was mostly planning to hire contractors, his expression had changed subtly. "Contractors from where?" "Portland. They'll charge you double and do half the work." He'd leaned across the counter conspiratorially. "Tell you what, I'll come take a look myself. Give you an honest assessment." I'd politely declined, but Roy Hutchins didn't seem to understand the word no. Every time I visited his store over the following months, he'd ask increasingly specific questions about my house. Which rooms I was working on first, whether I'd found the basement entrance yet, if I'd discovered the old root cellar behind the furnace. How did he know about a root cellar I hadn't even found yet? Been in that house many times over the years, he'd explained when I asked. Old Mrs. Pemberton and I were close, used to help her with repairs. But something in his tone suggested their relationship had been more than neighborly. The questions escalated to offers of specific tools I hadn't mentioned needing. A pipe wrench for the bathroom I was planning to renovate. A voltage tester for electrical work I'd only thought about. A sledgehammer for the wall I'd considered removing. You seem to know my plans better than I do, I joked one day, but Roy hadn't laughed. I pay attention, he'd said simply. Important to know what your neighbors are up to. The way he said neighbors made my skin crawl. Now, standing in my bedroom at 2:30 a.m., with an open basement door and footsteps in my house, Roy's intense interest in my renovations took on a sinister new meaning. I called 911, whispering my address and the situation to the dispatcher. While waiting for police, I crept downstairs and discovered what the intruder had left behind. On the basement stairs, placed carefully on the third step down, was a brand new claw hammer with a price tag still attached. The same $24.99 price tag from Hutchins Hardware. Sheriff Davidson arrived 20 minutes later, a heavy-set man with graying hair who'd clearly been roused from sleep. He examined the hammer with obvious skepticism. Roy Hutchins, he said, when I explained my suspicions. Rebecca, Roy's been running that hardware store for 30 years. He's harmless. Harmless people don't break into houses at night. You sure you locked that door? These old houses, locks don't always catch properly. But I knew I'd locked it. I'd developed obsessive security habits since the divorce, checking and double-checking every entry point before bed. I want to press charges, I said. Sheriff Davidson sighed. For what? Leaving you a hammer. Could have been anyone. Could have been kids playing pranks. Kids don't have keys to hardware stores. Roy's got family in town. Employees. Lots of people have access to his inventory. The investigation, such as it was, went nowhere. No fingerprints on the hammer besides mine from picking it up. No security cameras on my property. No witnesses in a town where houses sat on multiple acres and neighbors might as well live in different counties. But I wasn't stupid. I installed my own security system the next week. Cameras covering every entrance, motion sensors, the works. The technician who drove up from Bangor whistled when he saw my setup. Expecting trouble? He asked. Preparing for it, I replied. The cameras proved I wasn't paranoid. 2 weeks later, at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, motion sensors triggered alerts on my phone. I watched the live feed as a tall figure approached my back door, tried the handle, then peered through the kitchen window. The figure was wearing a baseball cap pulled low. But when he turned toward the camera, I caught a glimpse of his profile. Roy Hutchins, no question about it. He was carrying the same hammer he'd left on my stairs. For 20 minutes he circled my house like a predator, testing windows, checking for unlocked doors, occasionally stopping to stare directly up at my bedroom window. The next morning, I marched into the sheriff's office with video evidence. Sheriff Davidson barely glanced at the footage. Can't really make out the face, he said dismissively. Could be anyone in a baseball cap. That's Roy Hutchins. You sure about that? Pretty dark video, I'm sure. Even if it was Roy, walking around someone's property isn't illegal. Trespassing requires posted signs or verbal warnings. He was trying to break in. Looked to me like he was checking to make sure your doors were secure. Roy is like that. Looks out for people. The casual dismissal was almost as terrifying as Roy's stalking. This was a small town where the hardware store owner was probably the sheriff's friend. Maybe his brother-in-law or hunting buddy. Roy Hutchins was protected by decades of local relationships. I could never penetrate. I was on my own. That night, Roy didn't come alone. The motion sensors triggered at 12:15 a.m. But this time, there were two figures on my cameras, Roy and a younger man I didn't recognize, both carrying tools from the hardware store. They went straight to my basement window, a small ground-level opening I'd never thought to secure because it was too small for an adult to fit through, but it was perfect for passing tools inside. I watched in horror as they used a glass cutter to create a neat hole, just large enough to slip a crowbar through. The younger man reached inside and unlocked the window from within. They were going to enter through my basement while I slept. I called 911 again, but the dispatcher informed me Sheriff Davidson was off duty, and the nearest state police barracks was 40 minutes away. 40 minutes was plenty of time for whatever Roy had planned. I grabbed my car keys and ran for the garage, but as I backed out of my driveway, I saw Roy standing in the road, holding up his hand like a traffic cop. He was smiling. I floored the accelerator and drove straight at him. At the last second, he dove aside, rolling into the snow-covered ditch. I didn't stop to see if he was hurt. I drove to the state police barracks and spent the rest of the night giving statements to detectives who took my story seriously. They returned to my house with a search warrant and found Roy's tools scattered around my basement, along with something that made my blood freeze. Hidden behind my furnace was a collection of photographs. Dozens of pictures of me taken through my windows over the past 6 months. Pictures of me sleeping, showering, changing clothes. Pictures taken from inside my house, showing angles that were only possible if someone had been living in my basement. The root cellar Roy had mentioned, it connected to my basement through a hidden door behind the furnace. Mrs. Pemberton's house had been Roy's hunting ground for years, and when she died, he'd assumed the same privileges would transfer to the new owner. Roy Hutchins was arrested on charges of stalking, breaking and entering, and possession of voyeuristic materials. The younger man, his nephew, cooperated with police and revealed that Roy had been obsessed with me since my first visit to the hardware store. He talked about you constantly, the nephew told investigators. Said you needed someone to take care of you. Said you didn't know how to live alone safely. During the search of Roy's house, police found similar photo collections of 3 other women in town, all single, all recent transplants to Millfield. I moved to Vermont 2 weeks later, selling the house at a significant loss just to escape Roy's reach. Even with him in jail waiting trial, Millfield no longer felt safe. Too many people had known what he was doing and stayed silent, but my relief was short-lived. At my new house in Burlington, a package was waiting on my doorstep when I arrived with the moving truck. My name was printed neatly on the shipping label, but there was no return address. Inside was a set of deadbolt locks, still in their packaging, with a receipt from Hutchins Hardware, dated 3 days earlier. 2 days after Roy's arrest. Included was a handwritten note. For your new home, I know you'll need these. A friend who cares the locks were for a door configuration that perfectly matched my new house. A house I'd bought privately, with an address I'd never shared with anyone in Maine. I called the Millfield Police Department, but they informed me that Roy Hutchins had been released on bail pending trial. His nephew had posted bond and driven Roy home the day before my package arrived. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've received 2 more packages, a motion sensor light and a window alarm system, both from Hutchins Hardware. Roy Hutchins has never visited Vermont, according to his bail restrictions, but someone has been watching my house at night, and I'm starting to think Roy's nephew learned more than just hardware from his uncle. The road into Stillwater, Oklahoma, stretched dark and endless, my headlights slicing through the night. It was past midnight in September 2024, and I was bone-tired from a long haul across the plains, just looking for a bed. The town was dead quiet, not a soul on the streets, but every house glowed with light, curtains drawn tight, like they were hiding something. As I cruised past the town square, I heard it, a faint hum, like a radio left on static, coming from nowhere and everywhere. I shook it off, figuring it was my truck's engine acting up. But then I saw them, figures standing motionless in the shadows of the square, their faces hidden, staring right at me. My skin prickled, a cold sweat beading on my neck. Who were they? And why were they watching? I'm Riley, a 32-year-old truck driver who's seen every corner of the Midwest. I'd been on the road for 2 weeks, delivering parts to small-town factories, and Stillwater was just a pit stop on my way to Tulsa. I'm used to quiet towns, but this one felt different. Too still, too awake. I just wanted a cheap motel, a shower, and 6 hours of sleep before hitting the road again. The GPS led me to the edge of town, where a neon sign flickered, Stillwater Inn. The parking lot was empty, save for a rusted pickup, and the air smelled faintly of burnt rubber and dust. Inside the motel, the clerk, a gaunt man named Earl with deep-set eyes, checked me in with a smile that didn't reach his face. "Oh, nobody really sleeps in Stillwater," he said, sliding me a key. His words hung in the air, half joking but heavy, and I laughed it off, though my gut twisted. In my room, the bed sagged, and the walls were stained yellow from years of cigarette smoke. I locked the door, double-checked it, but couldn't shake the image of those figures in the square. As I lay down, that hum started again, faint but persistent, seeping through the walls. I told myself it was just the AC unit, but it felt alive, like a pulse. The next morning, I grabbed coffee at a diner across the street. The place was packed, but no one spoke above a whisper. Faces turned to watch me, their eyes lingering too long. My booth's table had scratches, deep and uneven, like someone had carved initials then gouged them out. The waitress, a wiry woman named Dot, poured my coffee with shaking hands. "You passing through?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, but she didn't smile, just glanced at the window where the blinds were half drawn. Outside, I saw a man across the street, standing still, staring at the diner. Was he one of the figures from last night? My pulse quickened, but when I looked again, he was gone. Back at the motel, my room felt wrong. My duffel bag was unzipped, my clothes slightly rearranged, though nothing was missing. Had I left it like that? I couldn't be sure. I checked the parking lot. My truck was fine, but there was a fresh dent on the tailgate, small but deliberate, like someone had tapped it with a hammer. My stomach churned. Was I being paranoid? I'd heard about small towns with weird vibes, but this felt personal. That night, the hum was louder, almost a low chant, and I swore I heard footsteps outside my door, slow and heavy, pausing just beyond the peephole. I didn't dare look. By the second day, I was on edge. I decided to leave early, but as I packed, I found a folded piece of paper under my pillow. A crude map of Stillwater, with a red X over the town square. My hands shook as I stuffed it in my pocket. At the front desk, Earl was there, his smile wider now. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his eyes flicking to my bag. I mumbled something and hurried to my truck. But as I pulled onto the main road, I saw them again. Figures in the alleys, motionless, watching. The hum was everywhere now, vibrating in my chest, and my rearview mirror showed a car trailing me. Too close, its driver hidden behind tinted glass. I floored it, the town blurring past, but the car kept pace. My heart pounded as I swerved onto a side street, hoping to lose it. The streets were a maze, every house lit up, curtains shut tight. The car followed, its headlights glaring like eyes. I turned again, my tires screeching, and saw a man step onto the road ahead, holding a tire iron. I slammed on the brakes, my truck skidding. He was tall, his face shadowed by a cap, but his eyes were sharp, predatory. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, almost drowned by the hum. I threw the truck into reverse, my hands trembling, and sped back toward the highway, the car still tailing me. At a gas station outside town, I pulled over, my breath ragged. The car didn't follow, but I could still feel their eyes on me. I called the county sheriff, spilling everything, the figures, the map, the hum. The deputy, a gruff woman named Carter, met me an hour later. She listened, her face unreadable, then said Stillwater had a history. "Folks call it a cult," she said. "They watch outsiders, scare 'em off. Been doing it for years, ever since a factory closed, and the town turned inward." They'd found evidence before. Hidden cameras, maps marking visitors' routes, even traps in the woods. But no one was ever charged. The town protected its own, she said. And the hum? Some kind of signal they use. Keeps everyone in line. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I drove straight to Tulsa, sold my truck, and took a bus home. The open road, once my life, feels like a threat now. Dot, the waitress, texted me once, apologizing for not warning me. She left Stillwater, too. Said the hum followed her for weeks. I'm in a new city now, but I keep my curtains drawn. Check my locks 3 times a night. The police say Stillwater's under watch, but no one's been caught. I still hear that hum sometimes, faint and pulsing, in the quiet of my apartment. Last week I found a folded map under my door, an X marking my building, and I wonder if Stillwater's eyes are still on me, waiting for me to close mine. The first thing I noticed about Sheriff Callahan was his eyes. Pale blue, almost colorless, like river stones bleached by years of sun. They didn't reflect light so much as absorb it, taking in every detail of my rental car, my city clothes, my out-of-state license plate. His cruiser's blue lights pulsed against the gathering dusk, turning the empty Kentucky road into an eerie tableau of shadows and harsh light. I'd been in Stillwater for exactly 8 days, just long enough to unpack my boxes in the small rental on Willow Creek Road, set up my remote workstation, and start believing I'd made the right choice in leaving Chicago behind. The town had seemed perfect, nestled in rolling hills, affordable housing, friendly nods from locals at the general store, until those blue lights appeared in my rearview mirror. "License and registration," Sheriff Callahan said, leaning down to my window. His voice was a low drawl that seemed to stretch each word, testing it before letting it go. His nameplate gleamed in the fading light, polished to a shine that matched his badge. I handed over my documents, trying to keep my hands steady. Was I speeding, officer? He didn't answer immediately, just studied my license with unsettling intensity. "Michael Reynolds," he finally said, tasting my name. "Chicago." He looked up, his gaze moving deliberately from my face to scan the interior of my car. "What brings you to Stillwater, Mr. Reynolds?" "Work," I explained, gesturing vaguely toward my laptop bag. "I'm a software developer. My company went remote after COVID, so I decided to try somewhere quieter, more affordable." The sound wasn't quite acknowledgement, wasn't quite skepticism. "And you're staying at the old Simmons place on Willow Creek." I felt a slight chill. I hadn't told anyone where I was living except my landlord, who lived 2 counties over. "That's right." "Living alone?" he asked, still not looking at my license. "Yes." "Family coming later?" "No, just me." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Which bedroom you using? The one upstairs facing the creek, or the back one toward the woods?" The question hit like a slap. Inappropriate, invasive, and somehow threatening. My pulse quickened. "The one facing the creek," I answered, unease crawling up my spine. Sheriff Callahan nodded slowly, finally handing back my license. His fingertips brushed against mine, lingering a moment too long. "Welcome to Stillwater, Mr. Reynolds. We like to keep an eye on newcomers." He returned to his cruiser without another word. No citation, no warning, no explanation for the stop. I watched in my rearview mirror as he sat there, not moving, just watching me drive away. That night, sleep came fitfully. Every creak of the old house, every whisper of wind through the eaves, sent my heart racing. Around 2 a.m., I got up for a glass of water. As I passed the living room window, something caught my eye. A dark shape parked across the street, partially obscured by the shadow of an oak tree. Sheriff Callahan's cruiser, headlights off, but the faint glow of dashboard lights visible inside. I froze, pressing myself against the wall beside the window. The cruiser sat motionless, a silent sentinel in the darkness. Minutes passed, maybe longer, before the dashboard lights winked out. The darkness became absolute, and I couldn't tell if he had left or simply gone dark. I didn't sleep another minute that night. Morning brought sunshine and birdsong, nature's attempt to convince me I'd imagined a night's unease. I made coffee, trying to focus on work emails, trying to dismiss the memory of those pale eyes watching me. But as I moved toward my desk, something stopped me cold. The back door was unlocked. I stood staring at it, coffee mug trembling in my hand. I was absolutely certain I'd locked it the night before. Had checked it twice, in fact, specifically because of my encounter with the sheriff. I pushed it open slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Muddy boot prints tracked across the worn linoleum of my kitchen floor. Size 12, maybe 13, with a distinctive tread pattern. They led directly from the back door, through the kitchen, down the hallway, stopping just outside my bedroom door. Someone had been in my house while I slept. Someone had stood outside my bedroom, watching me. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped my phone as I dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was cheerful, with a thick local accent I was still getting used to. I explained about the break-in, the footprints, trying to keep panic from overtaking my voice. Deputy Collins arrived 20 minutes later, young, round-faced, with a nervous habit of adjusting his belt. He listened patiently as I showed him the boot prints, explained about the sheriff's odd questions, the cruiser parked outside my house. Well, now, he said, kneeling to examine the prints. As for Sheriff Callahan, he just keeps an eye on newcomers. Makes folks feel safe. I stared at him, disbelief warring with rising panic. He was parked outside my house at 2 a.m., and someone was in my house last night. Deputy Collins chuckled, a dismissive sound that chilled me more than the footprints had. Sheriff's just being neighborly. Probably saw your door wasn't properly latched, checked it for you. He's like that. Thorough. I locked that door, I insisted, hearing the edge in my voice. Collins' smile faded slightly. Look, Mr. Reynolds, folks around here, they trust Sheriff Callahan. Been sheriff for 20 years. His daddy was sheriff before him. His family's protected this town for generations. He paused, his eyes suddenly serious. Best not to make accusations you can't back up. The warning was clear. I was the outsider. Sheriff Callahan was the law. I nodded numbly, watching Collins leave, his own boots leaving faint impressions next to the ones I'd found. When his patrol car disappeared down the road, I made my decision. I couldn't stay. I packed frantically, throwing clothes into suitcases, electronics into their cases, leaving furniture and kitchen items behind. I didn't care about my security deposit or the 3 months of rent I paid in advance. As I carried the last box to my car, I noticed it, a white envelope tucked into my mailbox. No stamp, no postmark, just my name written in a precise, steady hand. My stomach lurched. I left it there unopened and threw my box into the passenger seat. As I turned the key in the ignition, a county cruiser pulled into my driveway, blocking my exit. My heart sank as Sheriff Callahan stepped out, adjusting his hat against the midday sun. Going somewhere? Going somewhere? He asked, approaching my car with that same measured step I'd seen during the traffic stop. Just heading into town for supplies, I lied, aware of how obvious my packed car made the truth. Sheriff Callahan nodded slowly, his eyes taking in the boxes, the suitcases, the empty house visible through the open front door. Seems like a lot of luggage for a supply run. I'm visiting a friend after, I said, the lie sounding hollow even to my own ears. He stepped closer, resting one hand on my car door, leaning down until his face was level with mine. I caught his scent. Coffee, gun oil, and something else. Something earthy and metallic. Folks who come to Stillwater usually have a reason, he said quietly, running from something. Or someone. I'm not running from anything, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. No, his lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. Then why'd you change bedrooms? Move to the back room, facing the woods, after I specifically asked which room you were using. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone I'd switched rooms after finding the boot prints. I'd done it that morning, after Deputy Collins left. How did you? I know everything that happens in my town, he interrupted, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Every door that opens, every window that closes, every newcomer who thinks they can just disappear here. He reached out suddenly, and I flinched, but he only adjusted my collar, smoothing it with fingers that lingered too long against my neck. Drive safe now, he said, stepping back. Route 40's a dangerous road. Lots of blind curves. Easy to have an accident if you're not careful. The threat hung in the air between us, clear as day despite its phrasing. He returned to his cruiser and backed out slowly, watching me the entire time. I sat frozen, knuckles white on the steering wheel, until his vehicle disappeared around the bend. I left Stillwater that afternoon and never looked back. Drove straight through to Indianapolis, checked into a motel under a false name, and called my company to explain I'd be working from a different location indefinitely. I changed my phone number, created new email accounts, even started using my middle name professionally. 3 weeks later, settled into a small apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I thought I was safe. The fear had begun to fade, replaced by anger at having been driven away, then by relief at having escaped. Then the first letter arrived. No stamp, no postmark, just my name and new address written in a neat, precise hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words. I know where you sleep. I reported it to local police, who took the letter but didn't seem concerned. No direct threat, the officer explained, and no way to prove who sent it or how it got here. A week later, another letter appeared in my mailbox. Then another, each containing a single line. The Creekside room was safer. Did you check under your bed? I'm closer than you think. I moved again. And again. Changed apartments. Changed cities. Even considered changing my name legally. But the letters followed me, always appearing in my mailbox, never through official mail, never with stamps or postmarks. The most recent one arrived yesterday. Like the others, no stamp, no return address. But this one contained a photo. My mother's grave in Chicago, taken recently with fresh flowers placed on it. Flowers I hadn't put there. On the back, a message. I visited her for you. Told her you're doing fine. I don't sleep much these days. I check locks compulsively, scan every room when I enter, flinch at unexpected sounds, sometimes driving home late. I check my rearview mirror and half expect to see those blue lights flashing behind me. What terrifies me most isn't just that Sheriff Callahan is still watching me. It's that I don't know why. What did he see in me that first day that made me a target? What is he waiting for? And how many others before me found themselves under his watchful eye, only to disappear without a trace in a small Kentucky town where the sheriff knows every door that opens, every window that closes. I know one day I'll look up and he'll be there, standing on my doorstep or sitting in my living room, those pale eyes absorbing light, and he'll say, "Found you," with that same thin smile. And whatever happens next has already been decided, because in Stillwater, Kentucky, Sheriff Callahan doesn't just enforce the law. He is the law. The first time I heard the overnight train, the one that wasn't supposed to exist, I was 3 weeks into my new job in Prosperity. It was well past 2 a.m., and the sound, a low, mournful rumble, and the distant clatter of wheels on tracks, seemed to vibrate up through the floorboards of my tiny rented cabin. I sat bolt upright in bed. There were no active train lines anywhere near Prosperity, not for 50 years, according to the faded town maps in the Historical Society. Just the old, abandoned tracks leading up to the Blackwood mine. When I mentioned it to my landlord the next morning, a stoic woman named Mrs. Gable, she just gave me a tight, unreadable smile. Wind plays tricks in these mountains, dear. You'll get used to it. But the way her eyes flickered away, the sudden tension in her shoulders, I knew it wasn't the wind. Why would a ghost train be running in a town where the only way in or out was a single, treacherous mountain road? My name is Sarah. I'm an environmental engineer, and taking the job as safety inspector at the Blackwood mine in Prosperity, West Virginia, was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to escape the city and make a real difference. Prosperity was isolated, nestled deep in a remote Appalachian valley, accessible only by a 20-mile stretch of winding, poorly maintained asphalt, known locally as the Serpent Spine. The town itself was small, a tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone, and the Blackwood mine was the only real employer, the lifeblood of the place for generations. It felt like stepping back in time. Quaint, at first, the mine was old, a sprawling labyrinth of tunnels and outdated equipment. My predecessor, a man named Henderson, had apparently retired abruptly, due to health reasons, according to Mr. Davies, the mine foreman. A burly, taciturn man, with eyes like chips of coal. The pay was good, the air clean, mostly. And for the first few weeks, things were normal. I settled into my rented cabin on the outskirts of town, explored the stunning if rugged mountain trails on my days off. The suspicious signs started subtly. whispers in the town diner that would cease abruptly when I walked in. The way some of the older miners would avoid eye contact, their faces grim when I asked about certain outdated safety protocols. Then there were the night shifts at the mine. Officially, Blackwood Mine only ran a day shift, but sometimes, driving home late from a town council meeting, another quaint prosperity tradition, I'd see lights flickering high up on the mountain near the older, supposedly sealed-off sections of the mine, and I'd hear that phantom train again, its mournful whistle echoing through the valley. I started asking questions about the night activity, about Henderson's sudden retirement, about the strange metallic tang that sometimes laced the creek water downstream from the mine. Mr. Davies, the foreman, was always evasive. Old mine Miss Hayes makes noises. Henderson was just tired of the mountain life. The town doctor, a nervous, twitchy man named Albright, assured me the water was perfectly potable, within acceptable state limits. But his hands trembled when he said it. The more I asked, the more the friendly smiles of the townsfolk seemed to become strained, watchful. Was I overreacting? I'd wonder, am I just a city girl not used to the quirks of a small mining town? The escalation began when I started taking unauthorized soil and water samples near those old sealed-off mine entrances, the ones where I'd seen the lights. I'd hike up there after my shift, my Geiger counter clicking faintly, my heart pounding. The metallic smell was stronger up there, and I found strange, discolored patches of earth, devoid of any vegetation. One evening, as I was carefully bagging a soil sample, I heard a twig snap behind me. I whirled around. A figure, dressed in dark work clothes, their face obscured by a mining helmet and shadow, stood at the edge of the tree line, just watching me. They didn't move, didn't speak. Then, as quickly as I'd appeared, they melted back into the woods. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, my car wouldn't start. Dead battery, I thought. But the mechanic in town, a greasy, silent man named Jed, took one look under the hood and grunted. "Looks like someone cut your ignition wires, ma'am. Clean through." He wouldn't meet my eyes. Gonna take a few days to get parts up here, if I can get 'em. The serpent spine was my only way out. Now, it was close to me. I went to Sheriff Brody. He was a big, slow-moving man, his office dusty and smelling of stale coffee. I told him everything. The night train, the lights at the mine, the watcher in the woods, the cut ignition wires, my suspicions about illegal dumping, or worse. He listened patiently, whittling a piece of wood with a pocket knife. When I was done, he just sighed. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Prosperity is a quiet town. We like it that way. Sometimes, folks from the outside, they see things that ain't there. Get spooked by the mountain. As for your car, probably just some kids. Or a bear. Bears get under cars sometimes." He didn't offer to investigate. He didn't offer to help me get a rental. He just suggested I relax and enjoy the local hospitality while my car was being fixed. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That's when the chilling realization hit me. The serpent's spine wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a cage. And the whole town, from Mrs. Gable to Foreman Davies to Sheriff Brody, they were the keepers, keeping the door shut, keeping their secrets in. Henderson hadn't retired. He'd probably asked too many questions, too. What had happened to him? The local hospitality became suffocating. The watchful eyes were everywhere now. My phone calls would have strange clicks and echoes. My cabin felt less like a refuge and more like a fishbowl. I knew I had to get out, with or without my car. I found my soil and water samples, the ones I'd hidden under my floorboards, smashed, the contents spilled and inert, a clear message. The climax came on a moonless night. I'd packed a small bag, intending to hike out, to follow the serpent's spine on foot under cover of darkness. As I slipped out my back door, two figures detached themselves from the shadows of the pine trees bordering my yard. Foreman Davies and Jed, the mechanic. They weren't smiling. "Leaving so soon, Miss Hayes?" Davies asked, his voice soft, almost gentle. "But you haven't finished your inspection." Jed held a heavy wrench, its metal glinting faintly. "The mine has always provided for prosperity," Davies continued, taking a step closer. And prosperity takes care of the mine. We don't like outside interference. Henderson learned that. Looks like you need a reminder. There was no talking my way out of this. They were closing in. My only chance was the woods, the darkness. I threw my heavy flashlight at Davy's head, a desperate move, and plunged into the trees, not towards the road, but deeper into the unforgiving mountain. I could hear them crashing through the undergrowth behind me, their angry shouts echoing. I ran blindly, stumbling, falling, driven by pure terror. I don't know how long I ran, or how far. Eventually, by some miracle, I stumbled upon an old, overgrown logging trail, one not on any map, leading up over the ridge, away from Prosperity. It was a brutal, all-night trek. I made it to the next county by dawn, a scratched, exhausted, hysterical mess. I told my story to the state police. They listened. They investigated. When they finally went up the serpent's spine to Prosperity, they found a town united in its silence. The mine was operating within regulations. My car had been repaired and was waiting for me. Foreman Davis and Jay expressed concern over my sudden, unexplained departure. Henderson, no one seemed to remember him too clearly. The night train was just the wind. My samples were gone. They found nothing concrete. No proof. Prosperity closed ranks, its secrets held tight. I never went back. I couldn't. The job, the fresh start, it all turned into a nightmare of isolation and unspoken threat. The Blackwood mine still operates, its depths holding more than just coal. Old? So old. Mines. Its depths holding more. And the serpent's spine still winds its way up into those mountains. The only road in. And for some, the only road that never leads back out. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is just right, I swear I can still hear that mournful phantom whistle, and I wonder whose secrets Prosperity is still burying in the dark.